I've been like trying out this new social experiment. I know I said that I wouldn't do those anymore and that I was done, but I got bored, alright? I was really fucking bored because my sleeping schedule had gotten completely messed up. So I'd been up like when lots of people were sleeping, and I was just like, I don't feel like reading right now. This is just so late. I want to do something else. So anyway, I devised some other social where, you know, I share my very like unpleasant, well not unpleasant, I guess, I don't know, it depends on who you ask. But I'll share like a really unpopular opinion that I feel strongly about or whatever, even though like in situations where I would normally be like, nah, I'm not touching that, like I don't want to deal with it or whatever. And like let people get super angry with me and then like slowly just kind of like explain where I was coming from and like this and that and kind of like chill people out a little bit about like being so like immediately emotionally reactionary to stuff. Like I totally understand, but like it's not helpful, right? And I've seen like a lot of, I'm gonna be doing a stream about this, about like a lot of like things that I, you know, like it's interesting because I'm like very strongly, you know, like a leftist. I'm not gonna be like a leftist content creator that doesn't interest me at all. But I do definitely want to like talk about some things that I've seen that made me go like, okay, I'm not associating with any of this. I'll like watch some videos from afar, kind of see how people are like thinking about things or whatever, but like I'm not like gonna be involved. I've seen a lot of really fucked up and like toxic things that have really just like pushed people completely the opposite way. And I think like, and you know, I think it's totally possible because I know that like, you know, like having grown up in the gay like bar scene and things like that, like, you know, it wasn't very PC, especially in the early like, you know, to mid 2000s, and you know, so like I know that like when people were like, oh yeah, you can't be saying that shit, or I was like immediately like, really? Like, what do you mean I can't be saying this shit? Just boomerang the fuck out, basically, you know. So I kind of understand like I don't approve, but I understand like the psychology of like people getting like, if people come at you like really hard when you're just like curious or you just don't know or whatever, it can really sour your taste, and you'll just be like, well, I guess that's just how, you know, everyone is or whatever, and like go fuck off. And I would rather not have people who are like on the fence or just like don't understand things but want to or whatever, and like push them further the other way, you know, where they're just like, you know what, fuck all them gays or whatever, you know, because like people are like that. People can be really simple and really easily persuaded and dissuaded from things during times like that. So I would like to, like, I don't want to like get too involved in like discourse or anything like that, but I want to like be like, hey, like could do it like that, or you know, like, or maybe a little bit more like this, where we try and, you know, like instead of like let's just say like I know lots of people who just like really deeply and profoundly hate men for a variety of reasons, and a lot of that is pain-based. But personally, you know, I've been there myself a lot, and but I still feel there's a lot of value in judging people as individuals, even while acknowledging the societal problem, because, you know, I mean, without men being on our side to understand like what's happened to us, you know, and to hear our voices, like nothing's gonna get changed, and they're still gonna be shitty to us and blah blah blah. So yeah. Do I think people get overly defensive? I think people are overly reactionary, and I just in general people are. They might not be reactionaries, but in general people are very emotional and, you know, reactive. Yes. So and I think that because a lot of leftists have been through a lot of like shit themselves and have just dealt with a lot of fuckery and trying to like educate people and things like that, I think that they have very little patience for people who like just don't get it right away or whatever, which is why like I try and propose like more, not gray area, but like more things that like lead to more discussion instead of less, because while it's nobody's job to educate somebody, in an era of disinformation, it's not anyone's job, but it should be a lot of people's prerogative. You know what I mean? Like, it should be like, yeah, you should care about doing stuff like that, but you don't have to. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can still care about things, you know, and not have to, like, actually engage with people. It's not everyone has the emotional energy for it. Well, sometimes it's an opportunity. I should be clear about that. Sometimes it's an opportunity to educate somebody, and sometimes it is just a waste of your time. And, a lot of the times, like, they just try and engage with, leftists and LGBT people especially, because, LGBT people, they're the enemy or whatever. Basically just be incredibly, like, demeaning and things like that, and or just pretending to be ignorant, and then being like, why? I was just asking an innocent question. So I really want to help more people, like, kind of be able to, like, see the difference, like, or even if they can't see the difference between a sincere question or a non-sincere question, then to ask or go with a certain line of questioning so that you can determine whether or not they're being earnest, right? Instead of immediately just being like, assuming that they're just trolling, or, worse, leading dog whistly questions intentionally, to try and upset and fluster people and blah, 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 blah. And it's not like this overly mysterious, like, celestial fucking entity, right? It's like, it's something that's very tangible and noticeable, and I think people are starting to get better at it, but I think with, like, the advent of, like, more and more, like, boomers and older people, like, using the internet, like, regularly, just as regularly as young people, I think that, yeah, there should be some initiative to try and counter the narrative. A lot of the times, like, I've noticed with the boomer generation specifically, and this isn't me trying to be ageist, I mean, it was different with my grandma's generation, she was a great listener. I've noticed that there's a lot of defensiveness there, and because identity was, like, very, very important for the boomer generation, being an independent person, viewed as an independent entity, not being viewed as, like, this big, utilitarian worker thing or whatever, or a cog in the war machine or what the fuck ever. Like, they were like, no, like, this is me. That's why, like, the goth subculture came out, like disco even. Like, disco pissed a lot of people off, I fucking tell you what. And punk, came out around the same time. Later in the 70s, but yeah. Things like that. And, that kind of thing was, like, very, very important to them. And when you lump them into, like, a certain group based on, like, like, trends, behaviors, things like that, it upsets them a lot. It upsets them very much, and they get very defensive. And I've noticed that, that a lot of them feel like you're calling them stupid if you're like, okay, but this is not logical, like, this is not data-based, like, blah, 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 blah. That really upsets them. I've noticed that they can be very sensitive about that kind of thing. So I've tried to... Well, I'm not someone who words themselves very delicately. I'm not fucking delicate about the way I say things at fucking all. But I've learned to modify, like, the way that I'm talking based on my audience a little bit, just so that I can put things in a way that people, like, everybody can understand. And I know that that's kind of difficult. Like, I like meme shit and blah 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 and being sarcastic and yada yada yada, but that's not going to get me anywhere. And I would very much like to, because I mean, I wouldn't bother saying, like, oh, let's try this, if I hadn't done it for a very long time and had, like, good results. It's like maybe a 50-50 ratio of people who, like, actually are like, you know what, like, you've got a good point, or whatever, and then people who it's just like, I've just wasted a lot of my time, haven't I? Okay then. You know, or like, a lot of the times when you'll like try and explain these kinds of things, or like, you know, clear like misconceptions or like, you know, falsely repeated data or that kind of thing, a lot of the time they just won't answer because they just can't handle being. And that's the problem with everyone. Every generation has people like that. But when it comes to things like regarding politics or, you know, gender politics and things like that, like people get very, very defensive, and people on the left get defensive too, because a lot of them have been treated very badly, you know, by people like that, very badly, you know, or been hurt by men and things like that. So, I have, like, you know, dealt with not being heard and into the void and things. So I think, yeah, I do think that people can be very defensive about this kind of thing, and I don't really blame them for it. But I try, and when I start seeing that kind of thing happening, like when I got like 100, you know, notifications in like an hour one time, like I was like, okay, well, you know, I'm just gonna like calmly explain, you know, like where I'm coming from, and like, you know, not make any excuses, but just be like, oh, this is what I thought, my bad, or whatever, and then just be like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from too, like that makes sense. And really acknowledging that you understand where the other person is, like, or where their psychology is at, or like whatever, even if you don't agree, just kind of like letting them know that you understand where they're coming from to some even minuscule degree goes a long way. I've noticed. Or if you can, like, you can shift the conversation a little bit to the things that you do agree, things that you do agree on, and things like that. That opens the door to a lot more dialogue as well.